Okay. Hello, everybody. Now we have Julian Andres Klode, who will talk about apt 2.0 and other news. In case you don't have mood today yet, that's a fine occasion. Thank you very much.
Yeah, hello. Sorry I was a bit late. I mixed up the time a bit. So I wanted to talk about what happened recently in Appland and like dpkg and stuff. So one thing I would really like is code cleanup. So in experimental, we had an ABI break and I removed like 3,400 lines of C++ code, which was like all the deprecated API. And then I fixed all the reverse dependencies, which was a bit annoying, but well, if you break it, you have to fix it, right? And we also cleaned up all the includes that included other includes. So some stuff broke because it included a file implicitly via another header, and now it had to add the header as well, which was a bit annoying because you don't expect it to break because you don't see deprecation warnings in the build logs for the old package, and then it breaks and you just like think, oh no. And I also removed the internal copy of try-hash. If you don't know what try-hash is, I will have a talk on Thursday about it. It's basically a perfect hash function generator. More in the talk on Thursday. So another new thing I was working on was the Ubuntu Trusty ESM. One part of it, it was the never pinning. So in Trusty, in ESM, we wanted to have publicly available dists folder, but require authentication for the pool. So you can see which updates are available, but you can't install them unless you have bought the ESM package. And one idea was to add the ESM repository with a negative pin. So there's a tool that adds the repositories, and it would just install a preferences file where it pins the Ubuntu ESM origin to -1, something like that. But this has a few problems. So if you specify on the command line -t trusty, it would still install would try to install the ESM updates as well, because it also has the codename trusty. And if you added a pin in your preferences file, like you pinned release trusty to 100 for some reason, this would also potentially override your pin, depending on the order in which your pins are listed in the preferences file. So the solution for that is fairly simple. We just introduce a new pin. I called it never, so you can write pin priority :space never in your preferences file, and that pin just overrides any other pin, regardless of the order. So now you can disable a repository by specifying pin never, and no other pinning would override it, which might also have other applications. For example, in unattended upgrades, there's a lot of logic currently to install only security updates and filter out non-security updates. So it goes through the cache and changes the versions of the packages, so it only installs security updates. That's a bit slow, and it's maybe not entirely the best idea. You could potentially break stuff with that. So one solution might be to just modify unattended upgrades to pin away the origins it does not want. So any non-security repository would just be pinned to never, and then apt would automatically not install updates from there. And that would make things a lot easier in unattended upgrades, and would probably remove a lot of code there and vastly simplify and improve the performance and probably the safety of the whole thing. But we haven't tried it yet, and we'll have to see how it works out. Another thing that's been happening was locking fixes. So last year we introduced front-end locking for dpkg. So front-end locking was another lock. We added to dpkg because with the normal lock, the front end starts, it acquires the lock, and every time it has to run the dpkg binary, it has to release this lock because dpkg acquires the lock itself. And the front end lock is basically it's similar, but instead of releasing it, you just tell dpkg that you own the lock and it's okay not to acquire it. So you can keep the lock the entire time your front end runs, which means that it prevents another front end from using the race condition in the normal lock to run dpkg on its own at the same time as you are running calculations or something and you're not running dpkg. And that had a few there were a few issues with that because like we had apt daemon in Ubuntu and it waits for the log file when it has a transaction pending. So it would wait for the log file. You would have this this window between where your dpkg invocation ends and you reacquire the lock in the front end, or where the other window where you release the lock and then you run dpkg. And then apt daemon might come in and say, hey, I snatched this lock. And yeah, then your front end might just break in the middle of an installation, which was really annoying. Another few issues we had fixed was in python-apt mostly. Like when we downloaded deb files, we never released the lock. Even after we were done installing them, well, first of all, we didn't actually acquire the lock or like keep the lock the entire time. Then I fixed that and then I broke it, and now it never released the lock. And yeah, that's obviously a bad idea because if you want to run dpkg or something else afterwards and you don't release the lock, it just doesn't work correctly. And another stupid problem was like in python-apt when we closed the cache or when it went out of scope. So you had an apt package.cache object and went out of scope, it would automatically release or like decrement the lock counter for the dpkg lock. That's totally unexpected because it doesn't acquire the dpkg lock when you create the object. So you could write a code that says acquire the lock, then open a cache object, then you delete the cache object, and your lock is gone without you having released it. And this was really breaking unattended upgrades because it opens and closes the cache a lot of times because it calculates minimal upgrade sets because it wants to avoid having to wait a long time at shutdown. It calculates a minimal set it can execute in one transaction. And afterwards, it has to reopen the cache and rebuild it with the new updated dpkg status. And every time it did that, it basically got screwed by this bug because the lock was released when it shouldn't have been. And now that's fixed, we see a lot of less crashes. And we're really happy about this. Another thing that was happening recently was that people were saying, oh, we're installing updates and we're now running a reboot at the same time, and now our package manager is broken. So yeah, I mean, if you reboot while you're installing packages, that's going to happen. So I introduced an inhibitor in apt 1.8.1. So systemd inhibitor can prevent you from rebooting or shutting down your system. It can also prevent you from sleeping, from having the system sleep, or you can delay these actions as well. In this case, it's a block inhibitor. It prevents you from shutting down or rebooting the system while it's installing packages. But this is slightly incomplete, the support for this in systemd, because it only works for the systemctl command, and the GUI, it does not work if you run sudo reboot, because sudo reboot will then just ignore the inhibitors. But I think there are plans to fix this in systemd. In the issue that's linked there, well, it's not linked, but you can find it on GitHub if you look for it. I think the idea is to have reboot wait until the inhibitor is released, and then continue, even if it's a block inhibitor, not a delay inhibitor. And that would fix the problem for everyone. So if you have two administrators on a server, and one runs apt-this upgrade, and the other runs reboot at the same time, the reboot would wait until the disk upgrade is complete, which I think will make people happy and prevent broken systems. Yeah. You might have noticed it if you run Buster, or if you have testing in your sources list file. It broke when Buster was released. That was not entirely optimal. I'm sorry for that. So what did we want to do with that? We wanted to improve security. Like people could have, a man-in-the-middle attacker could have given you a stable repository when you were asking for stable security and prevent you from getting security updates this way. And we also wanted to enhance pinning safety. That's like a minor concern, because if you pin packages like you say you pin by code name, but in your source list file you write testing and then the code name changes, your pinning would no longer work because it's now a different code name. So if you have Buster, if you pin packages from Buster to 990 in your preferences file, and you have testing in your source list file and testing becomes bullseye, then obviously the pin is being ignored because it no longer applies to testing, but it's now stable. Right, so that's suboptimal. So I have a few ideas that could potentially help with these issues as well, but are less invasive than the release info changes. So for security, we already have a warning if the distribution in the repository does not match the one we have configured in the source list file. This did not really work for security very well because security had the same codename as stable. But that was changed recently because it's now -security instead of /updates. So we could make that an error and prevent most of these problems. And for pinning, I was thinking maybe we can check if the pin matches entries in source list files. But if it matches the file and it's pinning by codename and you have specified the source list entry by the suite name, then we could say, warning, you have specified testing for the pin, but Buster is in your sources list file. Well, bullseye is in your sources list file. And then you could fix it, and we would prevent you from writing pins that break once a new stable release is out. But this is still being discussed, so I got an email, but I haven't read it yet because I had written the talk. So we need to see if this is okay, if there are things missing. And I'm sure we'll figure out a solution that's less problematic with the next stable release. Okay, so other news from dpkg in this case. Trigger loops. We've seen a lot of trigger loops in Ubuntu upgrades, but there were also, I think, a few in various Debian upgrading tool tests. So you were in the middle of an upgrade and then it would say, oh, triggers looping, aborting. And this was really annoying. And since dpkg 1.19.7, I think, most of that should be fixed. So triggers should no longer be looping and aborting your upgrades. Rootless builds are possible now. There's the new rules require root field in Debian control that you can set to no, and then it builds without root. Start-stop daemon learned the new systemd readiness protocol, which I think is nice. dpkg Perl modules are on CPAN now, or CPAN. There's some improvements for cross-compilation support. And finally, a warning. If you're using the dpkg database, the database is to be considered private. So if you use it, you will break eventually. One thing that's blocking, this is one thing that's blocking various improvements. because we have a lot of packages that will break. For example, if we add the metadata tracking for installed files. So currently we just have a list of the installed files, and maybe we have an MD5 sum file. But the plan is to have like a full tree of installed files for each package and register hash sums and like extended attributes and stuff. And that's being blocked because it will change the database layout, and that's breaking a lot of packages right now. So we really need to fix those packages so we can move forward with new features for dpkg that need database layout changes. So let's talk a bit about apt2. What do we want? What would we want in a major release? What are our feature wish list, basically? So one thing I always want is patterns. So we can say like purge all config files. Or you could like search by description, search by version, or search by search packet, source package. That would be really nice because it enables you to like do a lot of more complex apt installs or removals on the command line without having to like apt list or like apt search or dpkg l something and then pipe it through various stuff and then xargs it to apt. And of course, if we have patterns, we can also pin by patterns. So you could like pin packages that start with an A, end with a Z, and like have version that starts with a 1 or something like that. You could do all kinds of weird pinning with that. Yeah, I started working on that by reconstructing the syntax tree that Auditório has. But I haven't finished it yet, but I hope I can still finish it and implement it. Probably not all of the features because some of it requires a Xabian database or something like that. So maybe it should be extensible, so you can like have Auditório install a plugin that adds like Xabian database lookups or other features to this. It would be nice. Another thing is pinning and upgrading my source package. Like if we get patterns, we would already get pinning and upgrading my source package. But it might be a bit slow. So I would like to modify app's cache so you can look up binary packages by their source package, and then it would be fast. And then you could easily pin packages by source packages, or you could potentially also say upgrades should always be the same version for all packages in the source package. So like it won't upgrade your architecture all package if your architecture any package is not ready yet, it's not built yet. And that I think would be useful. It's a feature people really want, I think, a lot of places, because it makes upgrading easier if all versions of the binaries in the source package are the same version. Finally, a better solver. I'm sure some of you know that I started working on a solver last year in summer. It was a few nights. It was called Carlel. Kind of lost interest. And one difficulty was to preserve some greediness aspects. Like if you have a package that depends on A or B, you want it to install A unless B is already installed. That's a bit hard if you have a really optimizing solver that works globally. So that's something that has to be worked on. Final thing was mandatory in-release files. I recently proposed that, but there are some open questions like what do we do about unsigned repositories? Do we still care about them? And what should we make signatures? Should we require signatures for all if we make them mandatory, we would also require signatures for all non-release files, which improves things because we no longer need to guess which files exist. And I'm a bit concerned about bugs that we have in the current signed to unsigned fallback, because it's like code split across parts. And if there's a bug, we could potentially like end up treating a signed repository or an unsigned repository as signed or something like that. But not sure yet how to proceed because it breaks a lot of things probably. And that's it. Any questions?
There is a question, or maybe a moo.
Hello, thanks for the talk. It's a bit more of like an I want a pony / wish list kind of thing, but something that I'm jealous of when I use Fedora from time to time is that you can say, for example, give me the package that provides me with this PC file or this GStreamer codec thing, which you can also do with PackageKit and Debian and stuff as well, but I mean, it's kind of hackish. So basically my pony is, can that be on an apt wish list? I don't expect you to work on it. Is that a reasonable feature to even ask for or not?
Yeah. I want to move that from PackageKit to apt, so we can easily query for codecs and package config stuff and like anything we have in apt stream.
Other questions or comments? One over there.
This is a request. App file for searching through the entire archive when you're looking for some obscure binary would be really useful if it was apt space file. So it's more of a request to add that feature. And maybe an RPM or an read the manual question is on app search at some point, you know, it's multi-line output now. Is there just a simple way to have it still be single line output in apt?
I think there's an option for the single line output, but I don't know it. So you probably want to read like app.conf man page. Sorry.
I think we should close because we are slightly over time. Thank you again, Julian. Thank you for your work, and thank you everybody for coming.